Betty needed her parents to support and care for her after she became pregnant by her boyfriend, but surprisingly, she was asked to make a difficult choice or risk losing it all. It has often been said that tables turn, and time again, this statement has proven to be true. Betty's parents owned a business and were amongst the richest in their town. Growing up, she lacked nothing, but her parents had always been a no-nonsense couple. All through her schooling years, she attended some of the best schools, and when she turned 18, her parents gave her a car. But things changed during her early weeks in school. Betty ran into Albert while carrying a load of books down her high school corridor, and he offered to help her. She thanked him for his generosity before quietly grabbing her belongings and leaving, although she felt he was a gentleman. Their first meeting struck an impression on the 18-year-old, and it seemed as if a force was at work between them, and they cut crossing paths in school. These chance encounters quickly evolved into love, and they were determined to make things work between them, no matter what they might face. Betty and Albert's romance soon blossomed into something huge, and soon she found out she was pregnant. Betty knew her life had just changed for the worse. She never told her parents about their relationship. Her mother, Gina, had always been skeptical about her children dating while in school, and finding out her teenage daughter was pregnant would be disastrous. As weeks went by, it became impossible to hide her pregnancy from her parents. She summoned the courage to tell them she was pregnant, and as she guessed, their reaction was far from positive. "How could you let that happen? And what do you mean by wanting to keep the baby?" Gina asked with a voice that showed her irritation and disappointment. "Stop it, Mom," Betty yelled. "Don't you care about my happiness?" she asked, breaking down in tears. She tried to explain to her parents that she and Albert loved each other and were willing to start a family together with the support of their parents, but Betty's father, Steve, wanted her to terminate the pregnancy. "That's the only way we can get out of this as a family," he said. He insisted that the child would be a disgrace to their family since she was not married. Betty was heartbroken that her parents wanted her to terminate her pregnancy. Although she knew her parents to be rigid, she thought they would have been more supportive. "You would have to choose between Albert and your family," said Betty's mom. "For a start, he does not come from a reputable family, so how do you expect our friends to think of us? We will be the laughingstock in town," she continued. Betty cried when her father told her to leave after she refused to terminate her baby or end her relationship with Albert. Her parents were both opposed to her pregnancy, and they didn't hesitate to cast their pregnant daughter out into the freezing weather. Being thrown into the cold night was not just heartbreaking for Betty, but physically uncomfortable for her and her baby. As she made her way for Albert's house, she realized she had gotten sick from the freezing weather outside. She had only made it to Albert's doorstep when she lost consciousness and collapsed. Luckily, Albert was on his way back from work and sighted her lying unconscious on the floor. "Betty, are you okay?" he asked in a panicked voice. Less than 3 minutes after he called 911, an ambulance arrived and took Betty to a nearby hospital. When she woke up, Betty realized the worst had happened. She had lost their child. It was a heartbreaking experience. Albert sat close to her, trying to fight back his tears while offering comfort to her. "We are going to be all right, babe," Albert said in a reassuring voice. It was difficult for words to get Betty out of her grief. She thought about her parents' betrayal and losing her baby. It felt like the end had come to her. Albert took some days off work to be with his grieving girlfriend, and weeks later, she began to feel better and move on from her loss. But somewhere in her heart, she was going to make her parents pay. Following the end of their sadness, Betty and Albert made it their priority to look for better jobs and take care of themselves. Luckily, Albert found a good job while Betty decided to complete her studies. She later graduated with a degree in business management, and a few months after her graduation, she got a job with a multinational. She and Albert were able to afford a comfortable life. She later discovered she was expecting another baby years after losing her first. For the first time in a long time, Betty felt like her world was filled with happiness again. Gina and Steve never bothered to reach out to their daughter, even though she had reached out to them asking them for a peace meeting. Seeing that her parents refused to be a part of her life, Betty decided to move on. She welcomed her daughter, Cindy, who instantly became the light of her world. She and Albert loved their daughter and were quite protective of her. One evening, Betty received a call from a client who had asked to meet her at a restaurant. On getting there, she realized it was her father, Steve, who was now a shadow of himself. Steve begged his daughter for forgiveness and asked her for help. "Your mom and I have lost everything, and we need you to assist us with a legal case or else we'd be ruined." Seeing how miserable her father looked, Betty agreed to help her parents, but she refused to grant their request when they asked to meet their granddaughter. "Her father is the man you once said was not from a reputable home, so I don't think it's a good idea," Betty said and walked out of the room, leaving her parents to battle their regrets. Betty refused to forgive her parents because Cindy would have had a sibling if not for their rigidity. However, she noted that she would allow Cindy to have a relationship with her grandparents if she ever wanted to.